Funny thing about people who cut someone off and then feel less lonely, everyone assumes the loneliness is supposed to get worse. But sometimes the room gets quiet in a way their body has been begging for. No more checking the phone like it is a tiny emotional landmine. No more rehearsing the safest version of a sentence before sending it. No more pretending proximity is connection when it has started to feel like surveillance. So the silence looks cold from the outside, but inside, it may be safety. It may be the nervous system finally lowering its shoulders. Because disengagement is not always isolation. Sometimes it is boundary filtering. Sometimes the person is not trying to disappear from the world. They are trying to stop leaking themselves into someone who kept making closeness feel expensive. And once the explaining stops, the energy does not vanish, it turns inward. That is why polyvagal theory matters here. The body is not being dramatic, it is deciding whether someone is safe enough to stay near. And when the answer keeps coming back no, silence becomes the softest exit available. This usually did not start yesterday. People do not randomly wake up one morning and decide, you know what sounds fun? Removing someone from my emotional life like I am cleaning out a junk drawer. There is usually a history, a pattern, a little museum of moments they never got to say out loud. Maybe early on, emotion was treated like a problem. Being upset made people annoyed. Being vulnerable made people uncomfortable. Needing reassurance got labeled as needy, dramatic, sensitive, too much, exhausting. So the lesson arrived quietly, not as a speech, as 1,000 tiny penalties. A sigh when they explained themselves. A changed tone when they asked for care. A joke made at the exact spot where they were already tender. That is operant conditioning in everyday clothes. When expression gets punished often enough, suppression starts looking smart. Not healthy, not peaceful, just smart. The person learns that emotional honesty creates more cleanup than comfort, so they stop offering it.
At first, it is temporary. Just stay quiet tonight. Just do not bring it up this time. Just let it pass.
But after enough repetitions, temporary silence becomes a whole personality, a permanent baseline. And later, when they finally cut someone off, people call it sudden. It was not sudden. It was just the first visible moment of something that had been quietly dying for a long time. And here is the part people miss. The person who disengages may look calm, almost too calm. Like they are casually deleting a contact while drinking coffee and pretending this is all very normal. But internally, there may be an entire courtroom open. Every message is being reviewed. Every tone shift is being replayed. Every past closeness is being measured against its cost. This is where the loneliness question gets tricky. Because from the outside, cutting someone off looks like choosing less connection. But from the inside, it can feel like removing a constant drain from the nervous system. Less proximity, but more oxygen. Less conversation, but less self-abandonment. Less social noise, but more room to hear their own thoughts again. Cognitive load theory helps explain why. Regulating emotion takes bandwidth. So does pretending nothing hurt. So does translating someone's mixed signals into a version your body can survive. And when one relationship keeps requiring that much internal labor, the person can start looking emotionally flat. Not because they do not care, because caring has become too expensive to show. That is the vacuum people mistake for apathy. A still face, a short reply, a delayed answer, a sudden boundary. But underneath it, the system is busy, sorting, comparing, protecting, trying to figure out whether this person is a home, a hallway, or another place where vulnerability goes to get stepped on. And the cutoff almost never begins with the big betrayal. People love big betrayals because they are clean. Easy to explain, easy to put in a sentence. They lied, they cheated, they humiliated me. But most relational disengagement is messier than that. It starts with tiny abrasions. A message ignored a little too long, a vulnerable thing turned into a joke, a boundary treated like a negotiation. A concern answered with that special little performance of confusion people do when they absolutely understood you the first time. Nothing dramatic enough to make a speech about. Nothing clean enough to bring into court. So the person archives it, they put it somewhere quiet, they tell themselves it is not worth the conflict. And maybe once, it is not. Maybe twice. Fine. Human beings are annoying little weather systems. Everyone has bad days. but the body keeps score in boring ink. The nervous system remembers what the mouth keeps dismissing, and over time, the distance starts building itself. Not with one explosion, with one unspoken nevermind after another. That is where the stress diathesis model fits. A person may already be carrying a sensitivity to relational strain, prior rejection, old abandonment, a history of having vulnerability mishandled. So each small moment lands on soil that is already tired. And eventually, the relationship does not feel unsafe because of one event. It feels unsafe because proximity has become a place where too many tiny things go untreated. Then comes the part that looks cold. The body stops sending emotional updates. No long paragraph, no midnight confession, no soft attempt to be understood. Just shorter answers, less availability, a strange little peace. And people misread that as maturity, cruelty, or indifference, depending on which hat they woke up wearing. But suppression does not make feeling disappear, it just changes the address. The emotion leaves the conversation and moves into the body, the tight chest, the weird stomach. The jaw that suddenly thinks it has a full-time job. The sleep that gets shallow because the nervous system is still arguing with someone who is not even in the room. This is why psychoneuroimmunology matters. The mind is not floating above the body like some fancy ghost. Social stress becomes physical weather. Long-term emotional containment can show up as inflammation, fatigue, tension, and that general haunted house feeling where nothing is technically wrong but everything feels too loud. So when someone finally disengages and feels relief, it may not mean they never cared. It may mean their body finally got permission to stop holding the relationship together from the inside. The silence feels lighter because the suppression tax has been removed. And sometimes that is the whole scandal, not revenge, not punishment. Just the nervous system refusing to keep paying for proximity that kept making it sick. Now, the interesting thing is this. People who disengage are not always looking for perfection. They are often looking for detection. A tiny sign that someone can notice the room changed, that someone can hear the silence before it becomes a wall, that someone can feel the shift and not immediately make it about themselves. Because before a cutoff becomes final, there are usually quiet tests, not manipulative tests, human tests. A delayed reply, hoping the other person notices the distance without demanding a performance. A softer voice, waiting to see whether anyone asks what happened. A small boundary, checking whether it will be respected or treated like an obstacle course. This is not drama, this is safety verification. The body is asking, can I be a little less armored here? And the answer comes through tiny moments. A friend who says, you got quiet, are we okay? A partner who does not punish the pause. A person who can sit near discomfort without grabbing a hammer and trying to fix it in 5 seconds. That is interpersonal neurobiology in normal clothes. Connection is not just words, it is nervous systems reading each other for permission. When someone responds with steadiness, the defense softens, the bridge comes back. The person may not suddenly become wide open, because vulnerability is not a vending machine, but something in them registers the signal, safe. Not perfectly safe, not magically healed, just safe enough to stay in proximity a little longer. And for people who cut off contacts and feel less lonely afterward, that distinction matters. They may not be rejecting connection. They may be rejecting the version of connection where they have to abandon themselves to maintain access. But there is one uncomfortable little twist. A defense can be real and still become outdated. The same silence that protected someone in a chaotic relationship can start costing them in a safer one. That is the annoying part of being human. The body does not always update its maps on time. It may keep reacting to a calm person as if they are the old person with a new haircut. A pause feels like abandonment. A tone change feels like danger. A normal misunderstanding feels like the opening scene of another emotional disaster documentary nobody asked to watch. So selective disengagement has to be understood carefully. Sometimes it is isolation risk, sometimes it is nervous system protection, sometimes it is pattern recognition, and sometimes it is access control. Not everyone deserves proximity, but not every moment of discomfort means someone is unsafe. That is where the old shield becomes expensive. It blocks harm, yes, but it can also block repair. It can block warmth. It can block the very people who would have stayed if they had been allowed to know where the tender place was. Evolutionary psychology makes this less mysterious. Defensive behaviors survive because they worked somewhere. At some point, pulling away reduced damage. At some point, silence prevented punishment. At some point, disappearing was smarter than begging to be understood. But a strategy built for threat can become heavy in peace, and the person may feel the cost before they have words for it. Less drama, less danger, but also less closeness. Less being known. Less of that soft human thing where someone sees the locked door and does not kick it down. They just wait nearby. And if this made something in your body go quiet for a second, not because it was cute, but because it was accurate, stay with that. That tiny recognition matters. Because some people spend years thinking they are cold, dramatic, avoidant, difficult, impossible to love, when really their system has just been trying to explain pain in the only language it had left. So if this helped you put language around that silence, you can subscribe for more videos that turn these strange little nervous system patterns into words without turning you into a villain or a motivational poster with anxiety. And if there is one sentence here that felt a little too personal, write it in the comments, not the whole story. Not the entire emotional crime scene, just the sentence. Sometimes naming the exact line that found you is the first small proof that you are not the only person living inside it. And after this, watch the next video on the screen, because it continues the same question from the other side. What happens when someone does not cut you off because they stopped caring, but because caring started costing them their body? Because sometimes the cutoff is clean, necessary, merciful, a locked door that should stay locked. And sometimes it is a smoke alarm screaming because someone made toast. The difference matters.
What drained you? What repeated? What changed in your body? Did the person repair, dismiss, minimize, mock, or actually listen?
Those questions matter because vague discomfort can become a fog machine. Everything looks dangerous in fog. But named patterns create edges. They let the person see whether they are protecting themselves from harm or protecting themselves from the vulnerability of being seen. That is action identification theory in ordinary life. Behavior changes, meaning depending on the level you name it from. Not texting back can mean avoidance. It can mean regulation, it can mean punishment, it can mean rest. It can mean the first honest boundary after years of emotional overspending. So no, feeling less lonely after cutting someone off does not automatically mean someone is broken. It may mean their nervous system finally found quiet. It may mean proximity had become too expensive. It may mean the relationship was not connection anymore, it was maintenance. And once the maintenance stopped, the person discovered something almost embarrassing. Silence did not swallow them, it held them. That is the part nobody wants to admit. Sometimes the loneliest place is not being alone. Sometimes it is staying available to someone who keeps making your vulnerability feel unsafe.